What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and we are finally here. Slopfest is over. Our year-long nightmare is officially over. James Harden has passed his physical. He is a Philadelphia 76er. And to talk about all of it, I'm having back on my buddy Jack, a.k.a. Fiona Apple Neck Tattoo, a.k.a. Chill Stable Guy, a.k.a. the Ben Simmons Diaper Guy. What's up, Jack?
Howdy. How you doing?
Too well. I felt like I was just introducing you in like a Wu-Tang song or something. So I wanted to have you on because me and you have been pretty much captivated by this whole thing for a year now. Obviously, last time you were on, we were talking before the season, and you had gone viral for calling Ben Simmons a baby and wearing his jersey like a diaper. So let's talk a little bit just about your reaction, because everyone knows what my reaction was when the trade went down. I was live on camera with a Nets fan, and it has become a meme in itself since then. So what was your reaction when the trade went down and we got James Harden?
So my immediate reaction, I fist pumped into my cubicle desk at work and then had to leave the room and take a walk to calm down. It reminded me, I remember exactly where I was when the Butler trade happened. I was also at work, and both times now I have immediately started tearing up, realizing that this is the moment, except this one feels real, where the Butler one felt like a stopgap. So like, I feel great.
Very normal reaction. Very normal fan base we have here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
it is funny. I keep seeing, and like you saw the clip of me. Obviously, you're describing what happened with you. I saw clips of kids in class, a kid in a classroom, like jumping up and literally fist pumping and going, "Let's go!" and high fiving the teacher. Like, Philadelphia Sports Brain is truly a thing that is just absolutely, undeniably amazing. And we are reacting as if we've already won the title for getting James Harden, which is my favorite part. And there is something unique about like when your favorite team gets a great player, that it just hits like another level of dopamine in your brain.
And for once, because the big thing with the Ben trade, it was always like, which star is going to be available? Who are we going to get for Ben? And we didn't have to settle. Like, we got the exact guy we wanted. Like, it was Harden all along. We waited for Harden. We waited and waited. We went through the mud. And we didn't get Beal. Like, we didn't have to get
exactly.
Beal. We didn't have to get, like, whatever Lillard is now that he's hurt on and off and kind of looked bad at the start of the year. And I mean, so is Harden, but at least he's James Harden. Like, we have James Harden.
Exactly. James Harden is a Sixer. I just keep saying that over and over to myself. It's like a mantra. Like, James Harden's a Sixer. James Harden's a Sixer.
Even though he wasn't there, going to the game last night, the vibes were just impeccable. Like, they showed a James Harden highlight clip during a timeout, and people gave a standing ovation. You want to know? Actually, here's a better perspective for how good the vibes are. They panned the camera to show Paul Millsap sitting in a box, and he got a standing ovation. That's how excited people are about James Harden being on the Sixers.
They were like, 37-year-old Paul Millsap, baby. Hey, we got a senior citizen backup center. Let's go.
We have worse Al Horford. I think we're ready to roll.
Are there any other 2015 Hawks we can get out there? Possibly bring Mike Scott out of retirement. Kyle Korver. Any other Jeff Teague? Is he out there? Hey, I don't know.
I'm kind of shocked Korver didn't get a 10-day this year, honestly. Like, if Johnston...
He probably could have if he wanted to. I think him and JJ Redick probably both could have. I just think that they're probably done with their careers. But before we get into that, it's funny when you were making that metaphor about, like, you know, we didn't have to settle for Beal, or we didn't have to settle for whoever it was that was out there. I was about to make like a Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo analogy, which is like, you know, like you have your first love, and then after you break up with her, it's like you're trying to find like the next one, but you can never replace her. Well, that was James Harden for us, basically.
Yeah, like especially for Morey.
Yes, exactly. Like literally his first love. Like, there's a famous photo out there of James Harden and Morey when he first traded for him with the Rockets. And there's like this graphic that went viral this week, and it was like, James Harden changed my life, Daryl Morey.
Well, that video of them hugging, you can tell like they're friends and weren't allowed to talk.
Absolutely.
Like, for Morey, half the point of the trade was just like, I miss hanging out with James Harden.
Yeah, 100%. It's literally like, it's like when celebrities or like Travis Scott or Pete Davidson or one of these celebrities will come out and be like, Kid Cudi saved my life. James Harden saved my life. Multiple times now for Daryl Morey. And it feels like the reaction to this trade that has happened has broken the brains of many people throughout the lying, sad, fake media, including many people that I respect and know a lot more about basketball. The first episode of this podcast I ever recorded, I did the same exact thing as what I'm about to do, which is basically what I just said. Like, the NBA media hates James Harden so fucking much that they cannot even like have a rational thought when it comes to him. Like, they can't be like, oh yeah, this guy was an MVP candidate and all NBA last year. And also, like, aside from this hamstring injury and him not wanting to be in Brooklyn, has actually still been pretty fucking good this season. And the Nets were the title favorites last year, and they probably should have been going into this season had all this shit not happened, and blah, 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 blah. But they still cannot let go their personal just hatred for Harden and the fact that Morey got his way. That really is what it feels like this backlash is.
And I feel like part of the Morey getting his way thing is the people still mad about the process writ large and how like it's not, you're not supposed to be able to succeed by ruining your team for 5 years. And it, I think, took longer than anyone expected, but like, you get Harden, who was an MVP candidate despite playing like garbage for the first 2 months of last year, and then forcing a trade and then having half a hamstring. Like,
yeah.
The thing that's breaking my brain about the Harden thing too is people saying it's like a bad fit.
Okay, so we could talk a little bit about that just up top. The Sixers just took Seth Curry, who is an ideal fit with Joel Embiid, undeniably. A very, very good, about the best role player you could ask for offensively with Joel Embiid. No one would deny that. He's a good ball handler, amazing shooter, can work off those dribble handoff options, like all that shit. No one denies that. They just replaced him with a 10-time All-Star who is still an All-Star this season despite playing like dog shit for a month. Like,
and the other thing is, like, Curry is a great fit with Embiid, but when Embiid's not on the floor, Curry's not going to be able to create anything. And I know Doc is Doc, so he's probably going to stagger them like garbage, but like, presumably Harden can just do things that no one else on the Sixers has been able to do since like Allen Iverson.
Like, like dribble, shoot, and pass. Like, that is the what, like, we just went a decade without having a player who could do two of the, like, the last person that we could have that could like dribble and shoot was like Lou Williams until Tyrese Maxey. Exactly, and now we have two players, one in Tyrese Maxey who can like dribble, shoot, and kind of pass. And then we have James Harden, who's like one of the best passers of all time, one of the best off the dribble shooters of all time, and also one of the best just creators, dribblers, playmakers of all time. And all people are talking about is how this hurts the Sixers and helps the Nets.
But it doesn't help the Nets because we don't know what Ben looks like yet. Like, that's what's driving me nuts about this too, is that there's this sense that like, well, the Nets got younger and they still have KD and Kyrie, and Ben doesn't need to shoot because he's going to be able to create for KD and Kyrie. But like, eventually there's going to be a point where Ben is under the basket and he's going to have to dunk it or he's going to have to throw it to KD. And admittedly, KD's a better guy to throw it to than he's had in the past. But like, I don't understand the thinking that Ben Simmons is a better fit than James Harden on literally any team in the NBA.
He is not.
He's just not as good.
He's not nearly as good. You literally just traded like the 12th best player in the NBA at worst in James Harden for like the 38th best player in the NBA. Do not tell me that this is an upgrade in any way. Now, maybe fit-wise, he might bring a little bit more to the table defensively with the open court playmaking and all of that shit. But there is no fucking GM in the league that would take Ben Simmons over James Harden. There just is not. And also, once again, the Nets were title favorites before the season. The Nets were on their way to winning the title last year. They were 13-3 when all of these guys were healthy together. Like, the idea that Ben Simmons makes them a better team is just cope. Like, yeah, maybe a disengaged James Harden would not be great, but we're just talking about a pure basketball fit, a pure basketball talent. There's literally no way the Nets are better with Ben Simmons than James Harden.
No, and like, not to go into Bill Simmons territory, but like, between the two of them, only one of them is going to be on the pyramid. Like,
hey, that's all that matters.
Like, Ben Simmons is not retiring like a top 75 NBA player, and James Harden is retiring like a top 30 NBA player, like maybe all time. Like,
correct, exactly. I just want to say that the main thing to me is like not only like their all-time standing, but like it's exactly what you just talked about a little bit ago. Like, this idea that like when Embiid sits, our team is a disaster in the playoffs. All we need is someone who can carry the offense while Embiid sits and make it so that we have the ability to outscore the other team or at least break even in the minutes that Embiid sits. Ben Simmons was never going to be that guy. He could never be that guy. He's a clunky fit
because
with Joel.
Create a shot
in the half court. Ben Simmons. Okay, so where did this idea come from? That like someone tweeted at me. His handle's 85MF, I believe it is. He tweeted at me the other day and said that the concept that Ben Simmons is going to be this great fit with the Brooklyn Nets is all based on things that he has never done before in his career. Setting ball screens, being a pick and pop big or pick and roll big, doing all the dirty work, being that high level role player that he really should be, all that shit. The only thing that is in reality is his defense, which yes, his perimeter defense is great and it will help the Nets, but everything that we talk about fit wise with Joel Embiid and James Harden that is clunky, to me, you can work through those things when you have two of the best isolation scorers in the NBA. James Harden is still the best isolation scorer in the NBA this season.
Exactly. And like the other thing is people talking about Ben and the things he could do for the Nets resembles nothing more to me than those like 6 years when like Westbrook was just kind of getting traded around. And it was like, oh, well, if Westbrook just started setting screens off ball and running to the basket instead of standing there and waiting. But that's the problem. He never learned how to do it. And we can't just assume Ben is going to learn how to do it. Like, he might just not want to be that guy. He
said it before. He said he wants to be the point guard.
He has insisted that he like knows what kind of player he is and people need to bend to his will. And the Sixers tried it. Like, Joel talked about it in that interview at the start of the year where he was like, we did everything to bend over backwards around Ben's game. Like, we got Horford because he could shoot despite being a big. We got Butler because it would take the ball out of Ben's hands sometimes. Like, we got rid of Butler so that Ben would be happy. And it was just never enough.
Drafted Tyrese Maxey to have another creator so that Ben didn't have to create in the playoffs. And by the way, when we probably lose game 6 of the Hawks series if Ben doesn't get into foul trouble and Tyrese Maxey can't come in and save us, like, it's the same fucking shit over and over. I'm so glad that we don't have to be the fan base that does this anymore, because I was listening to a Nets podcast earlier and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, we're free. We are free from the Ben Simmons thing. Like, it feels like I took Molly. That's how fucking good I feel when I think about not having to worry about the Ben Simmons thing. Cause he was like, I don't know. I'm just excited to see what Ben Simmons has worked on his game in the off season. And this 9 months he has not played basketball. And I'm like, well, I got a surprise for you. It's nothing.
And the other thing is, like, do you remember the Raptors series where Joel's plus minus was like insane? Like, he didn't play like 10 minutes and they still lost the game by like 3 points because his plus minus was like plus 12.
Yeah, that was game 7. Yeah.
You just take those minutes and give them to a guy who won MVP like 3 years ago now. Like, that's the thing I don't get about the fit. Like, if the whole problem is that the Sixers are like the best team in the league with Joel on the floor and trash without him, and you replace the without him minutes with James Harden, like, it can only go up.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I look at this whole situation as like, now, is it a hand and glove fit? No. I don't think that like anyone would be like, if there was actually funny talking about the Dame thing. Like, I think offensively the Dame fit would be probably cleaner because Dame is a pull-up shooter. He's willing to shoot off the catch. He's a pick and roll creator, but also is like, will shoot 10 threes a game. And Harden will do that too. But the large majority of Harden's threes are self-created looks, which by the way are great. We love that. We've never had a player who could do that, which is a very important thing. But at the same time, Harden will have to bend his game a little bit to fit with Embiid, and he has not done that before. That is the one legitimate case I think that you could have against the fit with the Sixers with Joel Embiid and James Harden. But if they are to not contend this year, they're not to win a title, if they're not to do whatever, I really do think it's going to come down to the fact that like the pieces around them right now are not ideal fits for them. So I'm not really going to look to Harden and Embiid and be like, how come you did this when like our third or fourth best player is Tobias Harris, who puts up like 3 threes a game and isn't a great defender. And also those are the things that you need to flourish around both of these players. It's just like, it will take a little bit of time, and I wouldn't even be surprised if the Sixers still lose in the second round. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like things don't hit on all cylinders, but you did this trade to preserve a year of Joel Embiid's prime. You got the best possible player that was out there. You only had to give up 2 active players on your roster that are role players and 2 future first round picks because Ben Simmons was an absolute zero. He was giving you nothing. He was never playing in Philadelphia again. And 2 weeks ago, fucking a month ago, people were like, just make the trade him for CJ McCollum. And it's like,
trade him
we got James Harden.
Halliburton.
Yeah, like we got James fucking Harden, and you're still like, Nets won this trade. Mo DeKeel from Nerder said that the Sixers are no better than they were before the trade deadline and that they're not even contenders. The Sixers are the only team in the NBA with 2 top 12 players.
And the other thing about it is like, it's not even that we got James Harden. It's that James Harden wanted to come to Philadelphia.
Yes. Thank you.
That is the kicker because, and it's, every team does it where like once you get one of those guys who like hangs out with all the other NBA guys and like does the Olympic things and it was why the Heat got Butler. Like everybody likes playing with Jimmy Butler and you can build that way. Like we have a guy that buyout guys will look at and go, oh, it's James Harden and Joel Embiid. Like we can do better than Ilyasova now. Like we're a real team. And we're going to have the
and
MVP
also we opened up possibly
MVP.
And we also possibly opened up rotation spots, which is another important thing for the buyout market. If we do get to the point where it's like, oh, there are buyout guys that could be looking to go somewhere, but the majority of the time, buyout guys are looking for opportunities in markets where they can get minutes. And the Sixers now, like the one thing I am really worried about is the bench, because it's like outside of our top 6, which is like our starters plus Danny Green coming off the bench, not sure how I feel about George Niang in the playoffs. Not sure how I feel about Furkan Korkmaz, Paul Reed, Shake Milton, all those guys. That opens up the 7th and 8th spot that can be won, basically. And Doc is going to play veterans over young guys. Like he just is.
And he's not going to play Isaiah Joe. Like Isaiah Joe is not getting that spot. He's going to. They're going to try to find buyout guys for sure.
Which honestly, like with now that you have. Really, the one thing is you have 4 guys, Tobias, Harden, Joel, Maxey, who all can at least create their own offense. At worst, they can create their own offense.
Yes.
That opens up things for guys like Isaiah Joe, for guys like even like Furkan, you can move him off the ball a little bit more and hope that he can get his shooting back and figure some things out there. That might make it so that Danny Green can play some more minutes, because you're going to need catch and shoot guys more so than anything else. And I think that on ball creation ability, like one of the things that people keep talking about was Seth Curry's fit, which, by the way, I do like Seth Curry's offensive fit with the Nets a lot. I think that might be the most underrated part of this trade for the Nets, is that they got a guy who is an insanely good shooter, all that stuff, blah, 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 blah. Seth's steps that he has taken as a player, as my buddy Dave from Twitter, aka Zaire Wade, pointed out, all of Seth's steps that he took this year were because he was getting more on-ball reps. He was shooting more mid-range shots. He was asked to run more pick and roll. He was asked to create for himself more often. And yes, while that does help, you're still taking the ball out of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Like, you're in Philadelphia, Tyrese Maxey. I would rather have Tyrese Maxey grow into that role than have Seth Curry, because defensively, you're going to have a lot more from Maxey. Maxey's going to compete a lot more in the defensive side. He's not going to be a total disaster on that end. And then on top of that, you have a guy who could potentially be a star. And while I love Seth Curry, like, he's always going to be a role player. And you're looking to basically try to optimize all of the guys that you currently have on the roster. And I think that one of the things that the Sixers should be looking towards as we get closer to the playoffs is like allowing Maxey to run some of those backup units, or even pairing him with Joel Embiid or James Harden, so that he can be that secondary creator that's slashing, that's shooting off the catch, that's running secondary pick and rolls, that's doing these things that we want from him, because Seth moving out actually opens up more stuff for Maxey.
And I will say, again, being at the game yesterday, Shake looked good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think his stat line was great, but it looked like he had this realization of, like, nobody is paying attention to me because I am Shake Milton and Joel Embiid is on the floor. And that means I can do stuff. Like, he was driving to the basket confidently because he realized no one was going to double him because they would have to come off of Joel, which you can't do. Like, it was just like one of those things, and Harden's going to help with that too. Like, when Harden and Embiid are on the floor and you can't play off either of them, it means you're not going to be able to like sprint over to. You're not going to be able to sprint over because Danny Green is hit or miss. Like, you can't play off of James Harden or you're fucked. So like,
yeah, exactly. And someone described it. It was actually a really funny description. They were like, James Harden is like if Shake Milton hit his 1000th percentile of a player. Like. Like, what if Shake Milton was a Hall of Fame player? Like, that's like a James, like Shake. Actually, it's funny. I got into it with Sixers fans the other day because in the Discord, I was talking to some people about Isaiah Joe. And I was like, I like Isaiah Joe's fit a lot more with this team now that we have an elite playmaker like James Harden, who requires to have those catch and shoot guys around him. If he can hold up defensively, I would like him a lot. But undeniably, Shake Milton has been better than Isaiah Joe this season. Shake Milton, when he's not been injured or coming back from injury, has actually been pretty fucking good. And with those second units, Maxey and Shake were kind of finding their groove down the stretch of last season. And then you have Harden and him potentially running backup units as well. Like, I think that Shake has been miscast as this backup point guard. And he might be able to flourish a little bit more now that he's not relied on to be a primary creator, and he can slide back to his more natural position of shooting guard. And we can hope that he gets over his Havana syndrome's shooting that he has, which somehow has infected every player that's played for the Sixers for the last decade.
And you know what's great about having Harden and Shake and Maxey? Is that Furkan doesn't have to dribble anymore. Like, I don't have to watch the offense. I love Furkan. I believed in Furkan. There were like 3 years. I remember when he requested a trade, and I was like, you can't get rid of Furkan.
No way.
But it's just insane that, like, because Ben wasn't there and he was the void of like rebounding and passing, that like Furkan had to run the offense, which is not something a team that's seriously contending should ever be considering. Like, he is a guy who should be he should be JJ Redick. Like, he should just be sprinting around off screens and getting open.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm hoping that having another guy who can just create those open looks for him will do a lot for his game in the second half of the season, because like someone said to me the other day, why didn't we trade Furkan at the deadline? And I was like, well, first off, he makes $5 million. So salary matching wise, you're not going to get back a great player for Furkan Korkmaz anyway. On top of
better value.
Right, on a better value. Like,
better value contracts are there that you can trade Furkan for? Like, nothing.
Do you think that Furkan Korkmaz is going to shoot 29% from three for the rest of the season? I don't think so. Like that is why he has struggled. Once again, he's being forced into a role that does not fit him because the Sixers have never had players who can do what James fucking Harden can do. And then on top of that, you have the fact that he is going through the coldest shooting streak of his life right now. Like, even when he was bad, he was not shooting this bad. Like 2018, 2019, Furkan could shoot in the high 30s. Then he shot in the high 40 or the low 40s. Then he shot in the high 30s again on high volume. Like, if Furkan can get back to the point where he's just that catch and shoot guy who can sometimes get in the way defensively and is like a plus passer and it can attack closeouts, like that's really all we need. And you're not going to get that guy on a $5 million contract. You're just not.
No, and it's the things that Harden is going to help Furkan with are also the things I think Harden is going to help Tobias with. Like, I think it's a lot of that same problem of like, Tobias Harris is good at basketball, but he's not good at the things that he had to do this year because Ben wasn't playing. Like,
Tobias Harris is good at basketball. He's just not good at making decisions at all.
Exactly, but he shouldn't have to anymore. Yeah. Like, James Harden can make the decision for him, which is kind of great.
We need Tobias to be on his Hooper shit. We need Hooper Tobias. Like, I'm not even like that's kind of a joke, but like kind of real.
No, exactly. Like, Tobias, when Jimmy was there, looked so much better because he just got to like get to his spots and do his little Hooper shit and then like run back down the floor and be like fine at defense.
Yeah, his defense has been worse this year. I am worried about that. Although it looked good last night. He picked up Garland and was playing great defense on Darius Garland.
Putting him in hell for like a couple minutes at a time.
I was like, okay, if this is the Tobias we get defensively, and offensively he can do what he did last year in the regular season and the year with Jimmy Butler, where he was kind of acting more as like an off-ball guy who could potentially be like run some actions, maybe help run bench units, all that shit. Great. My concern is Doc loves Tobias. Like, he still will, like, no one believes in Tobias more than Doc Rivers. And like it's like Doc believes in Tobias more than he believes in Austin Rivers. Like, he literally is never going to just be like, all right, you can be like, he might try to get Tobias to be that guy, but like, he's not going to pull Tobias if he's playing like fucking dog shit like he would with like Isaiah Joe or Shake Milton or one of the younger guys, or even Tyrese Maxey. Like, he would fully trust that Tobias can figure things out. And I am a little bit concerned in that regard. If Tobias doesn't like get back to the point where he's just shooting, like, we need Tobias to shoot at least 5 threes per game. Losing Seth Curry, like, Seth wasn't a high volume guy, but like, we're probably going to have to start Thibault now. And then we have Maxey, Thibault, and Tobias around Joel and Harden. And if you take all of their 3-pointers combined, they only average like 8.5 threes per game.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's not good.
Yeah, it's not great.
Danny also, himself will average 6 a game.
Maxey's shot, I think, is real.
It is 100%.
And part of it is that if Harden is initiating the offense, Maxey will be able to spot up more instead of driving to the basket for his floater. Like, I don't think he's super confident at pull-ups yet. I think he's more confident kind of just like getting the ball and shooting.
But the problem is that his first reaction to when he catches the ball is attacking a closeout. Like, if you watch the games, like, he's not a mindless shooter yet. And that is something that could take some, once again, why I'm like, even if the Sixers don't win the title this year, or even if they don't whatever, like, these last 20 games or so going into the playoffs, this is all a trial run with the chance to be champions. Like, there is whatever you talk about, your calculator boy shit that Daryl Morey does, where he puts numbers into a computer and says, this guy will give us a 10% chance, this guy will give us a 5, whatever it is. The Sixers odds are 100,000% better than they were a week ago. And that's all that fucking matters. Like, that's what it kind of comes down to me is like one of the things that I think that people are really still coping over basketball wise, that people will be incredibly annoyed with, is we are going to be the free throw merchants. We are going
to be beautiful.
It's going to be great.
Everything everyone hates about Harden's, like, I'm trying to think of the polite way to put it, but he's just like a fucking brat. Like, he's just like kind of like a shithead. And he knows, like, he's not, the difference between Harden and Kyrie is that Kyrie will avoid contact to make a pretty layup because he views basketball as like art and it's like an expression of himself. Whereas Harden is perfectly in line with Morey in that, like, if the idea of playing in the NBA is to win games and you win games by getting points, who cares how you get them?
Right, it's psycho shit.
The Rockets were like unwatchable the year before Chris Paul got there, when it was like just Harden. And
NBA's first year,
forcing contact like every single play. And there were reports on, like, is this going to ruin the NBA? Like, did Harden break the NBA? And
I hope the Sixers ruin the NBA. I hope basketball becomes an unwatchable experience. I know. Hey, there we go. Let's process. All right, we did it off the court a few years ago, where we just were like, you know what, we're gonna intentionally make a bad team, and we're gonna stack every asset we possibly can, and try to get stars, and try to do this rebuild, and blah blah blah. Now we're gonna just do it on the court, in the playoffs, in the regular season. I want basketball fans to hate the Sixers. I want basketball fans to literally want to die every time they have to play against the Sixers. Like, my goal is not to be like, oh, what a great, we played the Warriors and they just play such a beautiful game. Nope. I want fans of the other team to be contemplating suicide after we play them. Like, I want
the ugliest basketball that anyone has ever seen. We're playing basketball like it's the 90s, except we're trying to get hit. Like, it's like reverse 90s ball.
It's like, I want the Sixers to be an NFL team. Like, I want them to be fucking trying to draw flags every possession. I want them to be grinding teams to a fucking pace every game. Like, I want to drink the tears of fans of other fans, because I don't want to like basically have this whole reaction to like this whole cope fest that's been happening because Morey got his way and Harden got his way and even Ben got his way. Like, there's a little bit of that too, like people being mad about that element of it. I want them to be like, watching the Sixers is an excruciating experience, because not only are they better than my team and they're beating my team, but also because we can't do anything to stop Joel Embiid and James Harden.
Exactly. And like right now, no one in the league can stop Joel Embiid. He had Jared Allen just like at the end of his rope last night. Like
the best defense in basketball, he had a 40-point triple-double last night. That's also being conveniently left out when we talk about like past Joel performances and shit. Like, by the way, this is by far the best version of Joel Embiid.
It's the best version of Joel, and I've seen people nervous about how many games he's playing, but it really doesn't bug me because its conditioning has never been better. Like, it looks like it's keeping him in shape. Like, he's not overexerting himself. He's not hurt. His knee isn't acting up. Like, why not let him win MVP and roll into the playoffs confident? Like,
yeah, and realistically, like, another reason why getting a high usage guy like James Harden is important is that it will give Joel rest throughout the game on offense and on defense. You're going to be going back and forth.
Not only high usage, durable. Like, how many games has Harden missed in the last 5 years? It's not many. Like, he's not.
It's pretty much until the hamstring injury. It was like he didn't miss any. He was like an Iron Man for like 4 years.
Exactly, which was great for Joel because it means, like, let's say Joel's what, 28, 27?
Somewhere around. He's about to turn 28. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Joel Embiid is, if he keeps it up, will be like 30 something, and Harden will also be older by then. But having Harden means you don't have to play Joel. Like if you have games where it's like, oh, we're playing the Pacers, like one of the two can sit and we're fine.
Right, because their floor raising is insane.
It was the first or second KD Warriors year. They did load management games in the first round of the playoffs, which is still the absolute cockiest shit I've ever heard of in my life. But like for the regular season, you can get away with that if you're playing the Kings. Like, why does James have to play this game? Why does Joel have to play this game? Just like send one of them out, let them do their thing, go for 50, and we go home. Like,
yeah, exactly. No, I'm totally with you. And one of the things that I think that has been, I don't want to say it's overstated, but like, I'm not going to sit here and act like we got Houston prime peak James Harden. We don't need him to be prime peak James Harden.
But we also didn't get Lakers Malone. Like, it's not like we got like...
That is the thing. I keep hearing Chris Webber on the Sixers, Lakers Malone, Russell Westbrook. Like, James Harden is still...
Bynum.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a little bit different. Yeah, you know, I don't think that age really was the problem with him.
We just can't let James Harden go bowling. That's
yeah, seriously. We've had too many fucking war crimes happen when players go bowling. Although we wouldn't be sitting here right now if Andrew Bynum didn't go bowling in 2012 or 2011, whenever that was.
That is like the Domino's meme. It's Andrew Bynum goes bowling, James Harden is a Sixer.
I literally had a tweet when we traded for Jimmy Butler. It was Andrew Bynum goes bowling. The Sixers are title contenders after we got Jimmy Butler. Like, it's the same thing. Like, so the other thing I just want to talk about with Harden a little bit is, yes, the media hates him. Yes, he is not the same that he has been for his whole career. I'm not going to sit here and act like he has been. But we know what disengaged James Harden looks like, and it's kind of similar to what we've seen over the last few weeks and at the beginning of the season. And now all these reports are coming out that him and Kyrie...
Houston,
Yeah. And it's all these reports are coming out that him and Kyrie and him and KD even were like not getting along this entire season, and that Harden as early as training camp was thinking about asking for a trade to Philly. So he's now in a place where he wants to be. And on top of that, like when you look at like the history of guys who age really poorly, like John Wall right now, Russell Westbrook, Blake Griffin, all like go down the list of all of those guys. Unless there was like a major significant injury that wasn't like I pulled my hamstring twice and it hurts.
Yeah.
The majority of those guys are athletic guys that like rely on their...
James Harden doesn't really rely on his athleticism. He shows up every season 20 pounds overweight and plays his way down and can do it and still win MVP. Like,
yeah, like him, Luka, Jokic until recently, like they're kind of in this mold of player that like, and even like for example, like I don't think he's going to age as gracefully as Chris Paul, but like Chris Paul is another guy that like literally made his entire career on like trying really hard and being the smartest player on the court. And James Harden, you could say whatever you want, and I know all these capitalist fascists out there are anti-work-life balance and don't want James Harden to enjoy himself at nighttime, and we won't even talk about what he does during that time. But like this idea that Harden is just going to be washed in like 2 years, I just don't buy it, because like he's an extremely smart player who relies on craft and shooting and things that actually age pretty well. Now, in order to be the peak version of James Harden, yes, if he loses athleticism, he won't ever return to that form. But once again, he's the second best player on our team right now. He's not the best player on our team.
James Harden is like the co-host. Like, James Harden is a guest star for Joel Embiid, who has grown into everything anyone ever thought he could be. Like, Joel Embiid is
even better
his potential. In a way that I don't think like anyone ever thought he would. Also, speaking to James Harden at night, and going back to the Iverson comparison, it will be kind of nice to see a guy who's like still drunk on a 1 o'clock Sunday game go for 50. Like the games where Allen Iverson would show up and like stumble out and just go for like 35 and go home were legendary. And we have that guy again. And it just feels so good.
Spiritually, we are back in the Iverson era. Like the TGI Fridays on City Line Avenue is going to be absolutely popping over the next few weeks. But I had a tweet from before Harden asked out of Houston, which I have a little comparison I want to make in a second. But before Harden asked out from Houston, there was a game where it was his first game back. He didn't show up for preseason. He didn't show up for training camp. He showed up basically and was like, okay, I'll play in the first preseason game or the first regular season game. And basically took an Uber from the strip club to the game and dropped a 44-point triple-double in a win.
Exactly. Like
this was a calendar year ago.
Like James Harden has been phoning it in for the last 2 weeks and has still been the best available player on the Nets. And like the thing about Harden and Embiid too is like when Ben got drafted, there was all this worry of like, do Ben and Joel like each other? They were at Made in America together. Like, are they hanging out off the court? Like Harden, I don't give a shit. Like I know he's a pro. Like James Harden is going to show up and do his job because he likes his boss. And like it's going to be great. And frankly, the big thing they have in common right now is that like Joel is reasonably bitter at Ben for just deciding to punt on the season because he wasn't happy. And I know the Kyrie situation is different. And like this isn't like a vax mandate podcast. Like I don't give a shit to go into all of that. But like I think
because we're anti-vax.
Yeah, of course. But I do think Harden is like reasonably upset that he signed up to be like the third wheel on a team, and then KD got hurt, and then Kyrie decided he wasn't going to play for half the season, and suddenly it's Harden's team again, and it's all the shit he didn't want to have to do in Houston. Like
exactly
for all of the like Harden has never bent his game. He's been trying to for 2 years, and no one will let him.
Right. Okay. So I want to clarify. Harden has bent his game since he got to Brooklyn too, because last year he was basically like point Harden. Like he went back to what he was early in his career, where he was like the distributor who was also like an insane like scorer and whatever. He wasn't like the 37 points a game James Harden that we had grown accustomed to for his last few years in Houston. But the Sixers kind of just needed last year's version of James Harden running the offense, being the point guard, and like he can be a connector, he can be the primary guy. Maybe if we could just get him to be a little bit more like the one thing he has not been willing to do, and this is something that I think will be a point of emphasis now that he's playing with a ball dominant post center, is he hasn't been super active off ball. Like that is something that he needs to get better at. Running those actions with Joel, once again, dribble handoffs would be awesome. Those kind of things, like just having like the ability to catch and shoot and like the willingness to catch and shoot and not reset the action every time that they throw him the ball will be very, very important for his success. Now, maybe that will take a little bit of time to get used to all that shit, but like he has the ability to do it. We know he can do it. He shoots fucking 10 threes a game when he wants to. Like we need to basically rewire James Harden's brain into becoming basically the best version he can when he has the ball, but also more of a role player when he's off the ball.
And the other thing is, for all of the like Harden likes playing with pick and roll centers, which like Joel really isn't. Like he's willing to set picks, but he's not going to be like a rim runner every play. That's just like not what Joel does.
Right.
Harden's never had the chance either. Like he had Dwight and then he had Capella, and it's not like either of those guys should ever be like creating anything, especially where Dwight was in his career. Like, is Joel Embiid?
I mean, Kevin Durant
right now is like as good as KD was last year, probably.
That's what I'm saying. And also, like, by the way, best teammate of Harden's career, other than maybe Kevin Durant last year. Okay, they were gonna win the title last year. Like, that's the thing that's like everyone's talking about how the James Harden, the other trade was like a failure, and like, oh, like, and now it's like they all feel vindicated because they all said it wasn't going to work. But none of the reasons that people gave at the time, the ones that I brought up earlier in the episode, which is the same exact reaction to this trade. They weren't on the court things that didn't work. On the court, this worked. The Nets worked amazingly.
They're the best team since the KD Warriors.
Yeah, like it was the off the court stuff. And if you said that at the time, okay, fair, I'll give you a pass. But everyone was saying they won't play defense. There's too much on ball guys. It's not going to work. And by the way, it would have fucking worked if they had been able to stay friends off the court, but they weren't. So that's what fucking happened. And that element of it, I can understand worrying about, like, James Harden quitting on his team, like all that shit. We just had Ben Simmons not play basketball for 9 fucking months, dude. No one literally since the 1980s, a player has not done that. And to compare James Harden to Ben Simmons quitting on his teams when the second team was not what he signed up for. KD and Kyrie did not like him personally. And then on top of that, who would have wanted to stay in Houston? They fucking had their second best player was Christian Wood.
And the other thing is with like the trade and like, did the Nets win the trade? Did the Sixers win the trade? Within the context of it, if you told the Nets that they were going to trade everything that they traded for Harden, for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond, and 2 firsts, like, would they have been happy at the time?
Yes. And also, I just want to say, okay, I'm sorry. I'm saying yes to your point. The Nets would not have been happy that they basically, were to get back this package, especially like a disgruntled Ben Simmons, by the way, not like a Ben Simmons that was like 2.5 years ago when everyone was like, oh, this guy's going to be a top 5 player in the NBA. This guy's going to be a top 5. Like, we know what Ben Simmons is now, and maybe they can optimize him a little bit better, but like the majority of star trades, the large majority of star trades, the team that gets the better player wins the trade. Even if you go back to the one that everyone was like, what are they doing? What are the Clippers doing? They traded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 6 first-round picks for Paul George. The Clippers just got to their first Western Conference Finals ever because of Paul George, because Kawhi Leonard was hurt and Paul George was a fucking beast and got them to the Western Conference Final. Like, star trades, the team that gets the better player wins the star trade. Bottom fucking line.
And the other thing is, and everyone said it at the time too, you were trading for the ability to sign Kawhi.
Yes, that and also was a unique scenario in itself.
The Thunder had them over a barrel anyway, so there wasn't like much they could do. And frankly, like, it hasn't really worked out just because they've both been hurt and Kawhi's been hurt, and then all like this season's washed. But like,
they could be title favorites next year if Kawhi's Kawhi though.
And it's all about putting yourself in the best situation you can given the circumstances. And so they won the trade in that they created a team with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on it.
And they're good enough to win the title. They could have won the title last year. Like the results-based arguments that are going to come from this are going to be fucking insufferable. Because the Nets were going to be, even if you remove James Harden from the team, if they have Kevin Durant and even and sometimes Kyrie Irving and a bunch of role players, they're going to be really good. I don't care if they have Ben Simmons and Seth Curry, all that shit. Like, we know that the Nets are going to be really good if they have a healthy Kevin Durant, but like, they don't have that right now. And like, I just want to say, like, has there ever been a team that has had worse shit happen to them and won a title than the Nets this year? Just think about it. Just think about, like, okay, Kevin Durant's injured.
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving is only playing half of the games. James Harden forced to trade halfway through the season. You just traded for a player who has not played in 9 months. You traded for Seth Curry and Andre Drummond, who were on the team that Ben Simmons fucking abandoned. Like, the vibes could not be possibly worse for the Brooklyn Nets right now, like, no matter what they want to say.
I get why the Nets wanted Drummond because they needed a center, but also even when Drummond was still in his prime, Joel was like unafraid of the man. Like, it's been running back since he was like a rookie. Like, Joel just like can destroy Andre Drummond.
And this is the best version of Joel Embiid.
Like, I'm not worried about Andre Drummond. Like, it's going to be shitty when we have to play I want to play the Nets in the playoffs. I want it to happen. I need it to happen for like personal vindication reasons. but there's going to be a stretch where like against small guards, Maxey looks like what he knows what he's doing on defense. Like I went to the Hawks game earlier this year and he had Trae Young just like fucking stuck. And I think about it all the time because like you can put Maxey on Seth and I'm like not that worried about Seth.
Or Kyrie.
He's not gonna beat him off the dribble. Yeah. Or Kyrie. Well, I figure you put Matisse on Kyrie, but still, yeah.
I'd probably put Matisse on KD and just say like, and I mean, realistically, who are you going to put on Kevin Durant? Tobias? Like, because Tobias has the size, but
fair.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
although Matisse is at least smarter on D. Like, Matisse won't be able to like guard his jump shot, but who can? So, like, why try to stress about that part? And instead, just like maybe also, Matisse gets 3 steals a game.
Yep, and I just want to say that he did block he did block Kevin Durant in the Olympics. Although you're allowed to hand check in the Olympics, so it's a little bit easier. But so they're now saying that, just going back to that Nets podcast that I listened to earlier, the same podcast that like they actually did some really good reporting. They talked about how like Durant and Kyrie versus Harden became a thing. It was like there were whispers that like Durant was saying that Harden was washed and this wasn't what he signed up for. And basically this guy kind of gave blame to everyone. Matt Brooks, who did a great job of reporting on this, did a good job of breaking down why everyone was a little bit at fault, a little bit of Harden's fault, a little bit of whatever. Kyrie is still the one that caused, and obviously I'm biased, but like, if it weren't for Kyrie, James Harden wouldn't be a Sixer right now. Like, if it were just KD and Harden and a bunch of good role players, that's good enough to win a title in itself. And you don't even necessarily need Kyrie, but now you have your third straight team that he's gone to. They said on that podcast there's a 25% chance that they lift the mandate before the playoffs. Kyrie's not playing full time. If they play the Raptors in a play-in game, which, by the way, it could be the 7-8 matchup, he cannot play in a play-in game. And yeah, maybe they're good enough that they can figure it out, but it's a lot to figure out on the fly. They have to integrate Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond. They have all that shit that's going on there. And I just laughing at what Nets fans are going through with Ben Simmons that we went through through all those years. They basically talked about how, like, I don't know, maybe can he be PJ Tucker? Has he been working on a corner 3, a mid-range game? That I'm like, Ben Simmons is who he is. And like, maybe this is finally the most optimized version of Ben Simmons where he doesn't have to do a ton of shit in the half court. But ideally, there's no way in my mind that you can look at that and say, yeah, this is better than having one of the best shot creators of all time.
And the other thing is, it's like, well, is Ben Simmons going to turn into hyper-athletic Draymond Green? But he's not the decision maker. Like, Draymond Green's best quality is that he knows he's not the best player on the team. And Ben's worst quality is that he constantly thinks everything should be bending to his will.
Right, exactly. And like, also Draymond Green, psycho competitor. Do you think that
Draymond Green is an insane person also? He's going to become a coach and still lead the league in tax. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the thing that makes Draymond Green great is that he wants to fucking kill the other team. Like, Ben Simmons almost faked COVID to miss a game 7 because he was so nervous for it. Like, you think Draymond Green would ever do that?
No, Draymond Green would like fake a negative test. Like, Draymond Green would play through COVID to win a game 7.
He'd do the total opposite. Oh my God. But yeah, so just kind of the Draymond comparisons are hilarious to me because, like, yeah, maybe Ben could be a version of Draymond, but like peak Draymond was one of like the 5 greatest playoff defenders of all time. Like,
peak Draymond was the second best player on a title team. Like, peak Draymond was that good.
And also regular season, literally the greatest regular season team of all time. He was the second best player on that team. So
yeah, fair enough. I always
before they even got KD
there for that. Yeah.
Like,
the second best player on a team that beat the Bulls record. Like, what more could you want?
Exactly. So just kind of wrapping up everything that we've talked about. The Sixers are the villains now. The Sixers, I love it. It's so great that we will now get to go and like, once again, I don't know if this team is good enough to figure it out on the fly and win a title. I don't know if they are. I do know that this puts us in the best position that we possibly could be. When I was sitting here for 8 months trying to talk myself into CJ McCollum and De'Aaron Fox and even like Tyrese Halliburton, who I like a lot, but like is not nearly ever going to be the player that James Harden is right now. And I just want to say that all of the coping that is going on these podcasts and these tweets and all these people, it very much reminds me of like political pundit brain, where like like these guys just go on like MSNBC or like CNN or one of these stations and they just want to be the smartest guy in the room. So like they all somehow contrarian brain in NBA media has gone so far that the only two people that have been rational really on the largest stages of national media about this whole thing are Zach Lowe and Kevin O'Connor, who are both like, guys, they have James Harden and Joel Embiid now.
Which is the thing I respect about both of them, is that they're like like KOC more than Zach, but they're both like calculator boys, but they're also both like, at the end of the day, you got to be able to hoop. Like,
right. Like at the end of the day, you need two great players.
At the end of the day, we have like the best post defender in the league, who is also 7'2" and can hit Dirk fadeaways.
Yeah.
And now we have a guy who won MVP because he can create 3-pointers better than anyone who has literally ever played the sport, except like maybe Luka. Like Luka's like the only guy close.
It's like Jokic, Luka. Like, yeah, and you want to talk about like personally creating them for himself, like
yes, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah,
being able to just create
wise.
his own three. It's like him, Curry, and Luka, and then like everybody else.
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident that the Sixers. It's funny because everyone's worried about the Sixers' offensive fit. I'm fairly certain we're gonna have a top 5 offense with Joel Embiid. Just from like a math perspective. Like, want to go back to your calculator boy shit? A math perspective. The Sixers now have one of the best pick and roll scorers in the NBA, one of the best ISO scorers in the NBA, and James Harden, literally the best this season. With his down year, he's averaging 1.1 points per possession on ISOs, which is basically would be equivalent to like one of the best offenses in the NBA if you just ran that play.
I did not look that number up. Jesus Christ.
And then on top of that, you have Joel Embiid, who is 5th in isolation scoring this season. You have Tyrese Maxey, who's a budding star. You have enough shooting that I think it shouldn't matter. I do worry a little bit about Thibault in the half court. We'll see, but the Cavs, who have the best defense in the NBA, was like, yeah, just leave this guy and let him get wide open dunks. So maybe that will fix itself. And then I have my concerns about Tobias and like figuring out the efficient scoring and all that, but I'm fairly certain the Sixers will have a top offense. I'm a little bit worried about the defense, just because, not that going from Seth Curry to James Harden is like everyone's like, well, you just got rid of Seth Curry. And then I was like, yeah, but the Sixers defense was not good enough to win a title. It wasn't. Like, that was my thing, was like, I think Harden will probably overall, if he gives even an ounce of a shit, will probably be a better defender than Seth Curry. But my big concern is that like the pieces don't fit defensively. If you look at the starting lineup,
great, because it's going to be, the starting lineup would be what? Maxey, Harden, Tobias, and Danny?
No, Thibault. Well, that's the thing.
It's going to be Thibault.
It's good. We're going to have to choose, because if you start Danny, your half-court offense is going to be insane.
Yeah.
Because you cannot leave Danny Green open. Even if you think Danny Green is washed, he will still hit 43% of his corner threes. You can't leave Danny open in a corner for longer than a second. So if you do that, you're basically saying we're going to have the best half-court offense in the NBA, or maybe the second or third best behind like Phoenix or Golden State. But defensively, your point of attack defense is going to struggle a lot, because
it's going to be Maxey, Green, and
Harden.
Yeah, Maxey, Green, Harden, Tobias is not exactly a front line on defense.
Right. And if you just think about the fact that like Harden is used to a switching system, which is a very valid point. He's switched because he doesn't like to fight over screens. He doesn't like to get gritty with that shit. And you have Maxey, who's becoming a good defender, but he's still small. He can't switch.
Yeah, you can't put you can't switch Maxey onto like KD. Like that just doesn't. Yeah. You can't switch him onto a 4 ever.
Or even like Jason Tatum. Like it just wouldn't work. Like you can't switch Maxey onto guys. You can't switch Embiid onto guys because you want Embiid in the paint, protecting the paint and the rim. And then on top of that, Tobias is a help defender. He struggles a lot. So like Thibel's defense might prove to be so valuable that you can live with your half-court offense being a little bit worse, and you're hoping that him generating turnovers, whether he's on ball or he's off ball, can be enough to juice a transition offense with Maxey running the transition offense and getting out and Embiid sometimes and just fucking sprinting down the court and like basically making up for the points that you would lose in the half court by just creating a defense that gets into passing lanes and is like really tough to like not turn the ball over against.
And part of staggering Harden and Embiid to me is that I kind of want Matisse on the floor every minute that Harden is on the floor.
Just like covering up shit?
Well, to cover up shit on defense and on like the other side of it, like if Harden's doing that well on isolation scoring, it makes up for what Thybulle doesn't have. Like
True. And also if they ever blitz Harden in a pick and roll or they double team him at the top of the perimeter, Thybulle, we at least hope, can attack those 4-on-5 situations. I'm sorry, the what are they? 3? I can't even do math right now. But the 4-on-3 situations, like if they were to attack, like if they sent a double team out to James Harden and they left Matisse Thybulle wide open in the corner, you would hope Thybulle can get the ball, get downhill, get to the cup, or at least make the right decision in that time while the defense is too worried with Harden.
Yeah.
So basically, what we're looking at now for the rest of the season is like I still think that they might need a guy in the buyout market to like really shore up the rotation. Like I feel like if any of, which doesn't sound like Orlando's buying out Gary Harris, but like Gary Harris, Dennis Schroeder, anyone that's like a guard or a wing or even a big, like we could take anyone at this point because I don't know what the backup like. Paul Reed, Bassey, and Millsap is not going
to do it.
It's not great. But at the same time, I keep thinking back to the fact that James Harden is this insane pick and roll creator. And if you're staggering his minutes with Charles Bassey and you can use Bassey as like the fake worse version of Clint Capella, I don't hate that.
Yeah. I think I have to wrap it up in a couple minutes. So can I
No, you're good.
Can I lament the end of the process briefly?
Yes, I want to hear this.
So I loved the process. I loved it so much. I think it was really about the journey. And I've been thinking through the highlights of the process, and I've been thinking about like the TJ McConnell buzzer beater. I've been thinking about Mike Scott getting in a fist fight with Eagles fans. I've been thinking about watching Jakar Sampson start 50 games for the Philadelphia 76ers. And it's over, and it's a burden just lifted off of me. This is it. The whole point was to get a guy like Joel and draft him and develop him and then build a cast with a co-star that gives you a chance to win the title. And we're there.
It does feel a lot like, I don't want to say it's over, because if I accept the fact that it's over, that means that it didn't result in even contending for a title, like in reality. Like if they contend for the title for the next 3 seasons, then the process is over. Like, I feel like this is like the last chapter though. Like we're entering the end of what the whole goal of this thing was, which was to make other fans want to kill themselves when they play against us, which was really.
So in the wake of the Harden trade, I reread all 12 pages of the Sam Hinkie manifesto. And I wanted to give a brief reading to summarize my feelings on the next 3 years of the 76ers.
All right, let's hear it.
So, per the words of Sam Hinkie, in some decisions, the uncertainties are savage. You have to find a way to get comfortable with that range of outcomes. If you can't, you're forced to live with many fewer options to choose amongst, which leads over the long term to lesser and lesser outcomes. The illusion of control is an opiate. Nonetheless, it is an annoyingly necessary to get comfortable with many grades of maybe. Sixers fans come up to me and say hello, and many of them say the same thing almost instinctively as we part. Good luck. My standard reply, thanks, we'll need it. And that's how I feel about this. Like, we have what, like a 20% chance of winning a title in the next 3 years. That seems like a good. That's as good odds as you're ever gonna get. Like, we're in the best situation we're ever gonna be with Joel Embiid. And it just feels good that it happened.
It does feel good, but it also makes me nervous. Because anytime that something good happens to the Sixers, shortly after, something very bad happens to the Sixers. So I'm going to knock on wood right now and hope that everyone stays healthy and that James Harden himself doesn't, retire from the NBA because he wants to go live in France with Lil Baby, or do like
he wants to be Molly in Paris at Fashion Week for a living.
Total king, dude. But I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, Jack, for your wise words that you left us with, these parting words. Finally, it does feel like the Sixers, like I've been podcasting since the game 7 of the Hawks series, just being like, just give us a fucking chance. Just give us a fucking chance to win the title with Joel Embiid this season. And they made the only trade that could have been somewhat feasible at the trade deadline that did that. So fuck the media. Fuck everyone who doubted the process. Not me for doubting Morey, because I was right to doubt Morey, because if he was willing to take this through the deadline, then he's a fucking psycho. But he rebounded and he was right, and he was good to hold on to Ben and do all this shit. But now we're in the home stretch and we actually have a fucking chance. So
it's beautiful.
Let's get it. Let's get it. It makes me nervous, but it's also what we live for, dude. This is all the sicko shit we went through to get to this point. So, Jack, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. You can follow Jack at Chill Stable Guy. I'll leave the links in the description, and I will talk to you later this week. Peace.
Sweet. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime, bud.